Hi, everybody. In this unit, we examine arguments raised against stringent gun regulation. Our goal is not to endorse a position, but to analyze how these claims are constructed, what evidence they use, and how they fit within wider debates on law, security, and individual rights. Firearms policy spans four key domains: purchasing, selling, owning, and carrying. Each stage raises distinct regulatory questions, from vetting and background checks to safe storage and concealed carry. Understanding these categories helps us map where opposition to regulation is most intense. The regulatory clash centers on a tension between two priorities. On one side is the constitutional claim to self-protection and broad access to firearms. On the other is the legislative drive for vetting, safe storage, and public safety. Anti-regulation arguments emerge from navigating this tension. Our first theme is the prevention of gun-related crimes. We will explore how critics of strict regulation argue that limiting legal access does not reduce criminal activity, and instead may shift risk onto compliant, law-abiding citizens. Opponents contend that criminals, by definition, ignore laws, so tighter gun rules mainly hinder lawful citizens. They point to high gun crime rates in some tightly regulated cities as evidence that restricting legal access fails to deter offenders and may leave residents more vulnerable. Our second theme is mass shootings. Here we assess the claim that stringent local controls alone cannot curb large-scale violence. The focus is on how weapons may still be sourced from neighboring jurisdictions with more permissive laws. Evidence cited by critics suggests that many offences in highly regulated areas involve guns obtained elsewhere. They argue this undermines the impact of local restrictions on mass shootings, and instead highlights the adaptability of determined offenders within wider firearms markets. Third, we consider accidental fatalities, particularly in the home. In this section, we explore the view that household firearm ownership is justified as a practical form of self-defense in contexts of persistent violence and limited police protection. From this perspective, in high-crime settings with slow or unreliable policing, guns are framed as a necessary safeguard rather than a primary hazard. The argument holds that access to firearms can offset external risks that the state has not effectively managed. Our fourth focus is the effectiveness of law enforcement. Critics of regulation often argue that the priority should be stronger criminal justice responses to gun misuse rather than tighter controls on ordinary owners. Here, the proposed remedy is harsher penalties for firearm offences, including mandatory minimum sentences and sentencing enhancements. The logic is that credible punishment will deter misuse more effectively than restricting access for compliant citizens. Finally, we examine constitutional compatibility. Anti-regulation advocates stress that the right to bear arms is a core constitutional protection, closely linked to personal security and civic freedom. Limiting this right is framed as an infringement of basic civil liberty. Citing the Second Amendment, critics argue that any regulation must be weighed against the foundational principle that citizens should be able to protect themselves. To conclude, the anti-regulation framework rests on three pillars: perceived inefficacy of strict laws, potential endangerment of law-abiding citizens, and infringement of constitutional rights. Together, these claims structure the main educational case against tighter gun control. This learning resource has been curated and adapted for our course to facilitate critical engagement. As you review the material, consider both the strengths and the limitations of each argument within broader evidence-based policy debates.